Pamela Palayo. I'm the Chief Advancement Officer of Concord. I know all of you. But I am so pleased that you chose to spend this afternoon with us when it's such a beautiful day. You're willing to come in and have lunch and take part in our latest What's Up Doc. This one's really interesting because you always tell me that you learn something new every time we finish with a luncheon, but today you are really going to learn something new, and that's something that could potentially save a life someday, and I'm just so pleased that you're here. So our Stop the Bleed program is actually an initiative of our trauma program. It's a community outreach initiative. It's also going to become an initiative of the Concord Hospital Trust, because what we hope to do is raise enough money to put Stop the Bleed kits, the number necessary, in all of the schools throughout our service area. Now, one kit isn't really all that expensive. It's about $70, but when you consider the number of schools and you consider that you need to have more than one in a school, you realize that we're going to have to do some outreach to do it. But when you hear about the program, I think you'll think it's a very, very worthwhile endeavor. So when you're done today, our staff will be down at Market Days in downtown Concord with a tent. And if you are so motivated, we would love to have you participate, if only for an hour or two, to help us at our Market Days tent, talking to people about what you've learned about Stop the Bleed. So it's not heavy lifting, but we'd love to have you there. So I am pleased to welcome Dr. Lisa Patterson, who joined Concord Surgical Associates in 2015. She had arrived from Bay State Medical Center in Springfield, Massachusetts, where she served as Trauma Medical Director and Program Director for Surgical Critical Care and Acute Care Surgery Fellowships. Dr. Patterson brings to Concord Hospital extensive research and teaching experience, having attended medical school in Indiana University Medical Center, achieving her residency at both Case Western Reserve University and the State University of New York at Brooklyn, completing her fellowship at Jackson Memorial Hospital, Miami University. You've been all over the place, haven't you? All over the country. She is board certified by the American Board of Surgery, and please join me in welcoming Dr. Patterson.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I'm not usually a mild, soft-spoken person. This is going to be very informal, so if anybody has any questions along the way, please let me know. This is we're going to go through this program that we're taking out to schools, politicians, anybody who will have us, because this is not to teach people with medical knowledge how to do this, but how to teach, everyday people who might be at the scene of an accident or an injury that occurred, how to save a life. So it has quite a few names: Stop the Bleed, or BCON, which is short for bleeding control. And this is what we offer. And it's basically what everyone should know to control bleeding. This is supported by a very large number of organizations. I represent the American College of Surgeons Committee on Trauma. I'm the state chair, so every state chair has been commissioned to take this out to their states, their communities, and spread the word on this program. This whole program started after the Sandy Hook shooting, where children died, gunshot wounds, where they felt that some of those could have been prevented by stopping the bleeding. So this has really taken off after that. It took many years of cooperation between government and several organizations. And it's, like I said, we've been tasked to take this out to the community. And it's gone over very well in all the communities. We're a little bit behind other states in terms of how it's spread, but we are doing it statewide. And I appreciate the help that you guys have provided in helping us do that. Before I forget, the lovely Mary Reedy here, also in the trauma program, is here to help me. This is going to be hands-on at the end, so there is a sign-up sheet. Is that it right there, man?
Pass it around.
So we want you all to sign in.
You'll get a certificate mailed to you, emailed to you if you'd like. So just sign it.
Suitable for framing, Mary?
Suitable
Yes,
for
it
pink color, beautiful.
So the focus of this program is the immediate responsibility. We're not talking about the care that they get when they get brought into Concord Hospital. What can you do at the scene? Recognizing what life-threatening bleeding looks like and what are the appropriate ways that you can stop the bleeding. The help given by somebody who's there at the scene can often make the difference between life and death before professional help and rescuers arrive. This was seen very much as a fact at the Boston bombing, where immediate care was provided and many lives were saved because of that. So with the right training, you guys in the room can save a life. So I gotta warn you, I know you're all eating lunch, but there's some graphic images of real wounds. So if you're a little squeamish, this is a fair warning.
Eat quickly.
So you might say, why do I need this training? I mentioned that this developed after mass shooting bombings, but actually the more common is motor vehicle collisions, and you'd be surprised, a lot of work-related injuries. I have had patients that have saved their own lives, or the most recent one I can think of was a gentleman working in his workshop with, a saw of some kind, slipped, cut his arm, his artery, and he actually talked his son through applying a tourniquet to his arm, and it saved his life. So that's why we're here, is because these type of injuries can happen, and we just feel that it's a shame that somebody should bleed to death from an injury that can be controlled. So some of the basic principles: first, you ensure your own safety. The ABCs are call for help first. If nobody's called 911, make sure you call for help first. Then you're gonna find the bleeding, and then you control it. And we're gonna go through the types of techniques. Applying pressure, direct pressure stops all bleeding. So covering the wound with a cloth and applying direct pressure. This is not as easy as you might think, depending on how big of a vessel is bleeding. We do this all the time in surgery. If something starts bleeding, you push on it, and you stop it. In terms of the cloth, ideally there's a lot of stuff that we're going to go through that you can use, but if nothing else fails, a piece of clothing, anything, to push into the wound. We're going to also talk about tourniquet use, and then packing the wound with a gauze or clean cloth and putting pressure. So first and foremost is you got to make sure yourself is safe. If it's a dangerous situation, building collapse, shoot or whatever, you don't want to do something like this that's going to put your own life at risk. Because if you become injured, then you're not much help to the other person. Yes?
Everything that you're telling us, would that also apply to people that are on blood thinners? Or is that
Even more so, yes. Because the body's defense for bleeding is that you have platelets and stuff that will form a clot. Usually life-threatening bleeding like this is a big enough vessel that it may not. Blood thinners make you bleed even more and less likely to clot, so I'd say it's even more important than that. All right, the smaller the artery, let's say somebody cuts their artery here, it does eventually clot off as your blood pressure drops, but if you're talking about a bigger vessel, those usually don't clot very well and the person can die. Let's see. And then, obviously, protecting yourself from bloodborne infections if you have gloves or some sort of protection. But this may happen, and you may be dealing with your loved one, where you're going to want to save their life, and if you don't have gloves, then so be it. Call 911 first, or if there's somebody next to you, you can have somebody else call. Getting the medical responders on their way is very important before you start doing anything. And then B is identify where it's bleeding. So you want to look for life-threatening bleeding. There's probably not too many people in the room that's actually seen life-threatening bleeding. As a surgeon, obviously, I have. I didn't know if there was any retired military gentleman here. Anyway, obviously, if it's spurting, that is not a good sign. Blood that won't stop coming out of a wound. Large pool of blood, clothing that is absolutely soaked through with a lot of blood, or bandages that have soaked through. If they've almost lost their arm or leg, let's say it's a motorcycle accident or something like that where it's badly broken and almost off, there's usually a blood vessel injury, and that can bleed a lot. And then as you if you start losing blood and your blood pressure drops, you start to become confused initially, and then you'll lose consciousness because you're not getting the blood supply to your brain. So if you find somebody who's lost a lot of blood, who's confused or unconscious, that is a life-threatening bleed. So here comes the gory picture, sorry. I don't know if there's a way to turn off the front lights.
Yeah, there should be.
So it's not a video clip, but if there's blood spurting out of a wound, or what we say is an expanding hematoma, where you can see a wound just kind of rising up because of blood underneath. A lot of blood that has come out through a wound, soaking everything around it. Wounds that can bleed to death from include anything in the arms or legs. These are the ones that are most frequent cause of death that could potentially be prevented. In other words, you can interrupt the blood supply and stop bleeding from an extremity much easier than you can other areas, either by direct pressure or a tourniquet. And I know that picture there is graphic, but this is what I'm talking about. This is what we see often with car accidents or motorcycle, where this person's foot is almost off. And you can see a lot of broken bones, muscles, blood everywhere. Because that kind of injury is going to tear through the arteries to the foot. I don't hear any gagging sounds so far.
Of course, nobody's looking up at you either.
They're all going good. So other areas, these are called junctional wounds, where it's at the junction of your torso and extremity. These can also be controlled with direct pressure and packing of a wound. These are sometimes injuries seen in the military because they'll have protection on their torso, but something can hit them right at the junction, either down here or up there. And then wounds that occur inside the torso can't be stopped at the scene. That's the type of people that need to be brought in and see the inside of an operating room with myself or one of my Concord surgical partners. So those are chest and abdominal injuries, can cause internal bleeding. These victims require rapid transport to a trauma center if they're going to be saved. So they need to be usually the first ones to be transported. Any questions so far? So how do you do it? First, like I said, ensure your safety, look for the bleeding, and then do you have a first aid kit available? And if the answer to that is no, then you use whatever's available. Any kind of clean cloth, gauze, it might be a piece of clothing, and you apply steady pressure directly onto the wound. Now this does take effort because it takes a lot of pressure. Like I said, depending on where it is, if it's more proximal in the thigh, it takes a lot of pressure. And to do it right, it takes a lot of pressure, and you will get hand and finger fatigue. So we often, kind of like CPR, we have to trade off sometimes because your hands are going to get real tired because it's a hard pressure. And it helps if you put both hands down. So you use your hand or finger. If it's a small vessel, sometimes just a finger will do. Use two hands if possible, and it's effective most of the time for bleeding that you can see that's happening external. It can stop major arterial bleeding. It helps to know the anatomy, but it's not absolutely necessary because usually it's evident where it's bleeding from, and you just push down on what's bleeding. And I said it requires firm, continuous pressure. To be effective, it's ideally if they're on a firm surface and you don't release the pressure. So that's why I said you will get hand fatigue if you're doing it right. You don't press and say, has it stopped yet? And keep thinking, because that's not going to be effective. So this is just an example using, this gentleman's using his shirt, nothing else available. If the wound is large and deep, you try to stuff the gauze or garment or whatever inside the wound. And then you push directly. Push down as hard as you can, and you hold pressure until relieved by medical responders. So what happens if you have a kit available? Then where's the wound? Is it on the arm or leg? And then is a tourniquet available immediately? These kits that we provide Did you pass that around?
Yeah.
Okay. The kits that we have, and I actually carry one in my car too, we can pass them around the room if you guys want to see what's inside these. So if you have a tourniquet available, then you apply it above the bleeding site. You don't want to put it directly on the wound, you want to be slightly above it, and you tighten it until the bleeding stops. This is an example of a tourniquet above a wound. That probably is, I don't know if you can tell, but that's somebody's armpit, so that has cut the brachial artery, so they put the tourniquet right above that. And everybody know what a tourniquet is. Let's just back up. All right. I have a little demo on it. These are devices designed in the military, and if you look at it, and Mary's got one too, these are designed for a soldier to be able to apply to himself, him or herself. So on an extremity, even if they have an injured extremity, somebody can apply one to their own extremity, whether it's arm or leg. They're long because they can go, so an injured soldier should be able to apply this to themselves. So I have one here. We have these practice, but we're not going to be doing it to each other because they hurt.
So you can try it on yourself.
Yeah,
You should,
just don't tighten.
so you can see what it's like.
So this is a very good way of limiting the blood loss and preventing the person from going into shock and possibly dying from that injury. So, and again, it has to be not right at the junction of the torso, but where you can get a tourniquet above the injury. You apply it immediately if you have those signs of a life-threatening bleed. You could put it right on top of clothing, it doesn't matter. Usually 2 to 3 inches above the bleeding wound. You don't want to put it directly on the elbow or on the knee because the bones are going to prevent you from being able to tighten it down against what's bleeding. You also don't want to put it over, they've got some bulky items in their clothing. So sometimes you may have to take the clothing off to see and be able to know where to apply it. And then you tighten it. We're going to go through the step-by-step directions. You can only tighten it so far, and then this is called the windlass, which is going to do the rest. And again, it's meant to be able to be done by somebody on themselves. A little tight. All right, there's several different types. The CAT is probably the most well recognized. This is the military designed one, combat application tourniquet. We do have a wide variety here. The ones we use for practice are not meant to be used because if you keep practicing with them, they're really not effective anymore. And as Mary pointed out, that we always teach people, if you are going to buy one yourself, don't go for the cheap. I've looked on Amazon before, and these are, there are cheap fake versions. And you can, if you find anything for less than $20, it's a fake, and they will break, so don't go cheap if you go. I think the running cost is somewhere in the upper 20s, like $28, $29.
Not in bulk.
Yeah, you can get them cheaper if they're bulk. So soft EMT, CAT, these are all the versions that we have. We also have a variety, I think she passed around. This is the CAT tourniquet. It's preferred for the military because it's easy to use, can be rapidly applied by a soldier to himself or to his colleague. Those are the pieces of it. They're made large so that they can go around a large person's thigh, so that's why they're extra long like this, but you can also apply them to a smaller limb. And Velcro keeps it fastened like that. There's a clip, and then like I said, the windlass, you tighten it as tight as you can go, and then you use this to tighten it even further. And it will stop bleeding if applied appropriately. Then they always have a little place where there's a place to time it, because as a surgeon, if this person is coming from a remote area, I want to know when that tourniquet was applied, because you can cut off the blood supply to the extremity only for a limited period of time. It can stay on for a couple of hours and have no long-term effects, but we need to know how long it's been up. So you insert the wounded extremity in it. This is your seam there on the thigh and on the arm. You pull the band tight and then secure it back on the Velcro. And again, you gotta pull it as tight as you can with your hand force. Then you adhere the band. And then you use this windlass to start turning it. And you can feel it if you look at the thing. That thing will keep turning and it gets if you don't tighten it initially here, then you're not gonna be able to use the windlass effectively. So tighten it as tight as you can go and then use this to tighten it the rest of the way. And then once you have that, if you let go, it's gonna fly like a helicopter. That's why there's this clip to put it in once you get it tight. That's showing locking the windlass so it doesn't unravel. Then adhering the extra band through the clip. Secure the rod into the clip. We're going to go all through all this. You'll have experience doing it yourself. So I know it's confusing when you just look at the pictures. And here's where you mark what time that it was applied. So using one of the recommended tourniquet is the best way. You've seen people or heard people like using a necktie, a belt, or something like that. You just can't get the adequate pressure that these devices use. If you have nothing else, it's been done, but these are able to completely occlude the vessel, whereas others not. Plus, the way they're designed, they're not going to cause skin injury. If you try to tie like rope or a necktie or something, it's more likely to injure skin. If the bleeding is not stopped with one tourniquet, then you put another one just above that. So, some of the key points: no amputations have been caused with the tourniquet if it's left in place for a couple of hours, which is usually what's needed to get that person transported. But it's always best to leave it in place and get them. First thing I do as a surgeon is I take it off to evaluate them, but then I can manage and deal with the injury at the time. If blood spurts off, we put the tourniquet back up and we go to the operating room. It's better to risk damage to the arm or leg than to have that person bleed to death. And as I already mentioned, these are practice tourniquets that we don't use in real time because the material will fatigue. These hurt. I'm sure everybody in the room has had their blood pressure taken. And when they inflate it really, really high, it hurts. That's what a tourniquet does, and it doesn't come down in a second. So it hurts a lot. So if you are applying it to somebody, you need to explain to them that this is going to hurt a lot. But you're doing it to save the person's life, so even though you're causing them pain. It does not mean that you're putting it on inappropriately, because it will hurt. That's what I said, I did this too tightly, it was a little uncomfortable. And it does not mean that you should take it off if you're causing pain. So once the paramedics arrive, they can treat the pain, but they're not going to take it off. They're going to transport that patient to a hospital. Any questions? Yes?
How do you know if the tourniquet is too much? I mean, you made...
No such thing as too much. You twist it until the bleeding stops.
The bleeding may stop and you still have the tourniquet on.
No. That's why I said it can stay on for a couple of hours. That's not advisable. It's better to let like I said, the ambulance EMTs won't take it off. They will transport the patient and it'll get taken off by me when they come into the ER. And sometimes they never needed the tourniquet in the first place, but like I said, this is a life or death decision, so I don't ever fault anybody for putting one on, because by the time I see them, maybe it'll have stopped on its own.
The wound has bone fractures. Does the tourniquet in any way mess up the bone?
If you don't want to put it like right on the open wound and bone sticking out, you want to go above that. But no, we see some horribly mangled extremity where the bones are sticking out or their foot's going sideways. So you're not going to cause any further injury. Like I said, the chance of saving a life far outweighs the chance of you causing injury.
That actually brings up a good point. Is there a Good Samaritan, does the Good Samaritan law apply here?
Yes.
Okay.
Like I said, many tourniquets were used in the Boston bombing and saved people's lives. So there's a lot of people that lost their limbs, but didn't lose their lives. Some of the common mistakes is not using a tourniquet or waiting too long to apply it when there's life-threatening bleeding from a limb, not making it tight enough to stop the bleeding, or not using a second tourniquet when the first one is not doing the job. Or, as you had asked, periodically loosening it to see if it stopped bleeding. Like I said, once you put it on, leave it on. And as I already said, it should only be removed by somebody skilled and trained who knows how to apply it and deal with the injury. Any more questions on tourniquets? Yes?
What would cause a tourniquet to not work and require a second tourniquet, and where would you put it above the?
I would say that it's probably a very large vessel and possibly the size of the person, if they're morbidly obese, where you're going to need more pressure.
Okay.
So instead of breaking and practicing for that, I was going to go through the other half and then we can do it all at once because we have some model stuff for you guys to practice on. So let's say that you don't have a tourniquet. What do? This is where having a kit like this is very helpful. Again, any cloth will do, even if it's an article of clothing, but there's actually, I thought they were so open. There are many versions of this. We can pass this around, of a gauze that actually has material in it that causes clotting. I think the next slide shows all the, yeah, even if it's one of those wound beakers open. Hold on a second. Yeah, this is like, it feels like gauze, but there's actually material in it that actually causes clot to form. So, and there's a wide variety here, so we could pass this around if people want to see the type of thing. You can order this kind of stuff off Amazon. A lot of people who do wilderness stuff where they're out in the middle of nowhere have these type of kits just for that reason, that if they get injured and bleeding, that they have a way to control it. So these are hemostatic dressings. You use these ideally if you have them, but any gauze will do. So again, they look kind of like regular gauze, but they have hemostatic material inside of them. Here's some examples. Quick Clot is, I think, one of the more readily available. Combat gauze, the military, every soldier carries this in the equipment that they carry on their body. Celox Rapid, these are all types of gauzes with material that will help clot when they come into contact with blood. We use similar type of things as surgeons. We use these all the time. If there's oozing from where we just took the gallbladder out or something, we use agents like this all the time in surgery. So wound packing. You have to possibly take away some of their clothing to actually see where the wound is. If possible, remove some of the excess blood, because you want to put that gauze inside the wound. As gross as that sounds, that's where it's going to be most effective. So you need to know exactly where that is. So again, this is gross pictures, but this is showing the gauze actually going inside the wound. And the reason here, hemostatic dressing, gauze, roll, clean cloth, anything, stuff it directly into the wound and then put pressure. This is why it's important. This is not the way to do it. If you just put gauze on the surface and press, it's not stopping that little blood vessel or big blood vessel down here deep. It's just going to keep pulling and pouring out. That's why you need to stuff it down into the wound and then put pressure, and that's what's going to stop the bleeding.
Thank you so much.
So applying the gauze and then holding pressure. Somebody asked about broken bones. I would caution you that if it is somebody who just, car accident has a mangle, you have to be careful. Broken bones can have sharp pieces, so you don't want to cut yourself on somebody's broken bone. Initial packing and direct pressure fail to stop, then you can pack more gauze or think about a tourniquet if you have it available.
Can I stop you for a minute?
Absolutely.
You're talking about broken bones. If there's a wound and the bone fractured and sticking out of the wound, should you pack the bone back into the wound, or would you lift the bone and pack on the bone?
It's not so much the bone that's probably gonna cause, bones do bleed, but it's usually the blood. Most arteries run in pretty close proximity to a bone. So what we always teach is you try, one of the things is to possibly put the extremity into anatomical alignment. And that may mean straight, if the ankle is going off 90 degrees, it's to bring it back to normal position. So, but you're not aiming to pack the bone per se. This is where it helps to try to see where it's bleeding from. And that's why tourniquets may be more helpful in this situation, because if the lower down you go, there's three significant blood vessels going down your leg. So, all three bleeding, it's not gonna, a tourniquet's probably more helpful than trying to pack individually.
So moving the extremity back into alignment is not going to present problems to the surgeon when we get to the hospital to reset.
That's what EMS does all the time. They put it hurts though. If you try to straighten it out, they're gonna scream if they're still awake because it hurts. But it's the best thing to do.
If you can't do that, just apply the tourniquet.
Yeah. Any questions about the wound packing part? So, I think we'll break at the end. I'm just gonna go through the summary part. This type of stuff can be done for children, except for think about it, if it's a young child, 1-2 years old, their blood vessels are gonna be a lot smaller, so direct pressure is probably gonna work a lot better and so I don't think I've ever seen a very young child that required a tourniquet. And except for a very small child, most of these tourniquets are adjustable for like a 7-8-year-old. For large, deep wounds, the wound packing can be performed in children as well as adults. And then, obviously, if you do get exposed to blood, you need to wash with soap and water, notify medical responders of possible exposure. Blood exposure to your skin is not a problem. It's, like I said, possibly getting poked with a sharp bone or something like that. So in summary, call for help first. Find the bleeding, and then apply pressure, or use a tourniquet, or pack the wound. Did I forget anything?
I don't think so.
All right. And that, like I said, the whole reason this course has been developed is they felt that the only thing more tragic than a death is the death that could have been prevented. And again, this also has to do with where whatever the incident is happened. Some people live quite remote where it takes EMS a long time to get there. So having somebody available or even being able to do it, like I said, I've had quite a few men working in their shops that have saved their own lives knowing this type of stuff. So thank you for your participation. We tried to go through that very quickly, but now it's time to play, to actually practice.
So we thought we would break it up into 6 different stations. We'll have 2 at each table, and then 1 here and 1 here. You're welcome to play as long as you want.
Especially just become familiar with what these look like, because you guys helped us get these, and our whole purpose is to take this out to the community, to absolutely whoever wants this type of education. The schools have been clamoring for this, to learn how to do this type of thing. And the goal of the American College of Surgeons is they would like to see these kind of kits just as prevalent as the AEDs, the shock things that you see in the airports and everything like that.
And that's where we're keeping them. Schools and other places are putting a tourniquet kit or a stop the bleed kit right with the AED, so they know where they are. And then the nurses will have one in their office. The administrators will have one in their office. Usually depends on how many students are in the school, but we've trained like 500 students already, or 500 faculty already in various schools around our area. Statewide, over 1,000. Our community's been very proactive with getting schools trained, and we continue to do that. And that's because we've had the support of the trust to be able to give these kits out for free to those schools, and we'll keep doing that as long as we have them.
So Mary, I'm sorry, I had to step out. Was there a ratio in terms of the number of kits needed per number of students?
Yeah, so they don't really specify one. I would recommend, like 1 per 100 or thereabouts.
There's only one tourniquet per package, but there's, gauze supply and all that. These kits, although they seem kind of expensive, I tried to like individually add up the costs, and they're pretty cheap, the prepackaged forms. We do have examples of these various things, because like I said, these type of things you can get at any wilderness store like REI and all that, where there's a whole package with hemostatic gauze and various things, gloves, etc. On your feet, try to work on the lunch bag, that might be it.
Wrench it down, don't worry about breaking it.
That was just a demo, there was an actual supplement.
No, that's just the back.
Just one more, it's okay. It's okay. You're okay, sorry.
Chainsaw, we've seen plenty of chainsaw injuries.
So I do. So it needs to be a little bit tighter, right? So yeah, we want it. But you would want to put it on this a little bit tighter.
Yes, this is meant. It's better than nothing, but they've shown studies that it doesn't provide that enough pressure. You can't pull it as tight as it is. That's what that is really crazy. And we inflate it to a pressure above their. They've lost a lot of money. It's not going to take that much as a weight.
No, this is just an 18.